Nikki here. I'm here today to review The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This is the spoiler-free review for this book, so you shouldn't ruin anything for you guys if you haven't read it yet, and if you have, feel free to look for my spoiler-filled one that will be following this video. The book itself is a sci-fi. I would also categorize it into the subgenre of humor, because if you weren't aware of this, it is just a goofy book. This was a really fun read. I had a really good time with it. It was also really good to listen to. I did flip back and forth between reading and listening to it. And the copy that I listened to was narrated by Stephen Fry, who I believe also happens to narrate the movie that they did of this in 2005. And he was just a blast to listen to. I recommend either version, but if you want to go for the audiobook route, Stephen Fry is great to listen to. Douglas Adams is a master of description, so every time he describes something to you, it takes you on an adventure. And this book is really no exception. What it is it's following a few groups kind of on their journey through the galaxy, and they're discovering the galaxy with some just crazy antics and just weird obstacles and bizarre happenings, and it's the most important thing to take away from the book is don't panic. All right, guys, so now I'm gonna do my likes. I typically do 3 likes and 3 dislikes for each book. That gives you an idea of what the book is like and if it'll work for you. So to start, I'll talk about my 3 likes. With this book, one of my first like is that the characters are just crazy and goofy and fun, and they're varied. They're so much fun to read. They're so much fun to get to know, and they're just so zany and kooky that jump off the page and they grab you and pull you right into the story. They're really entertaining, and I found them really fun to read. My second like is Douglas Adams' descriptions. He has a special way of taking a concept that could easily even just have a single word used to describe it, but he takes a concept and kind of twists it around, splashes it with some extra words, and tops it with some humor, and he does it in such a way that you really understand what's going on. He has a talent for unique descriptions that catch you off guard, and even if you don't quite know exactly what the situation he's using as the reference is, by the time you're done reading it, you understand what he's trying to say, and you understand the feeling or the scene that he's describing perfectly. It's a rare talent that Douglas Adams has that he is just the master of, and I love it, and he does it so well in this book. That being said, my third like is that the pacing is good. As you can see, it is a thin book, less than 200 pages, and because of that, the pacing is very quick, it's very snappy. You're always going at a good pace, you're always moving the plot forward. I never really feel like it sits down and pauses and drags out with unnecessary dialogue. Everything that happens in the book is with purpose for most extent. There's not a lot of prose that's just description for description's sake, and I really appreciate that because it sets a good atmosphere for the book. That being said, I'm going to move on to my 3 dislikes. My first dislike is sometimes it's a little hard to follow. The pacing is really nice, it's very quick, but sometimes instead of jumping forward, it jumps to the side, and it's hard to follow because the crazy, goofy decisions sometimes will not have the effect that the reader expects, and I found that sometimes very jolting, and I would hit the wall in the book. It would pull me out of it for a minute, but then I'd regroup and start reading again, and it would pull me back in. It's a little jarring, just some parts are a little disconnected. Not a big thing, not a huge issue, but if you're not expecting it, it could really disorient the reader. There's the second dislike. It's not one that I personally hold, but it's one that I often hear with people who didn't enjoy the book, and it's that the book is too silly. And I do understand that a little bit because it is very, very goofy. And if you go in expecting a straight sci-fi that takes itself seriously, or at least the topic seriously, that's not what you're getting. You are getting a book that is funny and makes fun of itself and makes fun of different tropes in books. So I understand when people say that the book is too silly. I just don't think it's necessarily a negative. But like I said, I'm just mentioning it here because it is a dislike I've heard mentioned by people who don't enjoy this book. My third dislike is that while the speed is nice, sometimes the characters limp along in certain places. One of the main characters doesn't get to acclimate properly to a lot of the scenarios, and because of that, rather than just simply flying by the seat of his pants, he almost just kind of stands still with a stupid look on his face. Like, that's how I feel when I read it, and I wish he'd had a little bit more of a chance to acclimate, and I feel like that the flying by the seat of the pants would have felt a little more natural and a little less overwhelming. That's it for my likes and dislikes. I will now move on to my characters. They were just odd and intriguing and completely dysfunctional and just all around crazy and goofy. They were a blast to read, like I'd mentioned earlier. And the main four that you deal with are Zaphod Beeblebrox, Trillian, Arthur Dent, and Ford Prefect. They're so much fun to read. They kind of have their own agendas, but they come together to try to accomplish something using their own ideas. And it's very goofy chaos. It's so much fun to read. It's so enjoyable. And I'm not going to talk too much about the characters because how they are in the books and how they're described in the books when you're introduced to them has so much to do with how much I enjoyed them because of how they're introduced and because of what they do. I really don't want to go too much detail and give anything away. It's a quick read. The characters will reach off the page and grab you pretty quickly. The characters were very enjoyable because of that. That's all I'm going to say about the characters with my likes and dislikes in the summary. Now, all out of the way, I'm just going to do a quick wrap up here. I really recommend this book for people who think they would enjoy an eccentric sci-fi, because yeah, it's a sci-fi and all of those elements are there, but you really have to understand this book is not taking itself seriously, and the humor goes from goofy to downright insane, and it's just, you'll either love it or you hate it. I'm in the love it camp. I think it's a lot of fun. I think that the humor just makes a lot of the concepts really accessible, and I find that the humor mixed with the sci-fi just makes it really entertaining and really gripping, which is especially nice since it's such a short book. You really feel like the galaxy you're traveling through gets laid out as you need it. You don't get too much info, but you get enough to know what's going on, and you get a little bit extra for flavor. And like I said, I really love the goofy touches with the sci-fi plot. It mixes so well, and Douglas Adams does a really good job of making them work really well together. He just has this way of writing that makes it really easy and accessible, and the writing is just phenomenal and fun, and it's just an easy read that's very enjoyable. So that being said, I'll stop gushing about Douglas Adams and his writing. I'll give you the rating. So for me, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a 4.5 stars out of 5. The rapid pacing is super interesting, but at the same time, it causes some of the characters to limp around because they haven't acclimated properly. And so while sometimes the pacing does take away from the characters for me, overall I felt it was really good for the atmosphere. It was a fun read. Overall, it was just really enjoyable. I have a good time every time I read it. And it's so crazy and goofy. That makes everything so much more intriguing because you never know which way they're gonna go. And all the way through, sometimes you're kept guessing what the characters are gonna do. Sometimes you kind of are able to see what they're gonna do, and it comes together just for a very great experience. And next time you have a time to read a book less than 200 pages, I really recommend this one. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.